I'm going to start today with a stanza out of my favorite psalm, which is Psalm 51. And it reads, it's 10 through 13. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence, and do not take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and sustain me with a willing spirit. Then I will teach transgressors your ways, and sinners will be converted to you. So that's Psalm 51. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about Jesus and Daniel and how often he's mentioned in Daniel. It seems that when Jesus' ministry, he referenced Daniel and Isaiah a lot, the prophets that predicted or foretold the different things that the Messiah would be doing. And if we remember when he went to Nazareth and went into the church to read, he read from Isaiah that the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, da 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 da. And then when he finished, he said, this prophecy has been fulfilled today, And that's what got everybody, wait a minute, isn't this Joseph's son, the carpenter, and he's claiming to be God? And so we're going to look at this. We're going to start at 722 BC, kind of a long time ago. It says, Jerusalem's under attack. Israel, its sister kingdom to the north, has already been exiled, and now Judah faces the same fate. So 72 BC, we're under attack. In 605, the third year of King Jehoiakim, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem and started the first of many deportations to Babylon. Sarah, Daniel 1:1.
In the third year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it.
So right there in Daniel, very first verse, we start this timeline of prophecies that end up leading to the first century Common Era, when Jesus and the Christian church, which was a part of Judaism, is beginning. Okay, Daniel and his three friends were among those first brought into exile, facing many fears and doubts. How were they to make sense of exile and destruction of the temple, the center of their religion? How were they to make sense of what their religion was in when they weren't there to be with their people and the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy of Holies in God's presence? How were they going to do that? Which got me to thinking about, what would we do if our church were destroyed? We didn't really leave the church during COVID, but I know the church we went to in Georgia did all the services through Zoom. Did y'all do Zoom services for a while?
We did Zoom, we wore masks in church for a long time.
Yeah, we
We
did too.
probably Zoomed for about a year.
That's what we did. We Zoomed
And then
for
when
about
we
a
came
year.
back, the pews were marked, so you couldn't sit too close to anybody. So it's
Okay.
very sparse. And we continue to Zoom through today.
What, just let your imaginations roam for a minute. What do you think happened in 722 BC? They don't have Zoom. And all of a sudden, their meeting place is gone.
Right.
How do you maintain a sense of community?
Yeah, and it wasn't just meeting for them. They had to sacrifice animals to God. They had no way to do that.
Yeah, all of the ritual that was part of their belief was gone, and so this was very, I got to thinking about how would I feel? I mean, when I'm going through a bad time, I can just reach out and say, hey, I'm going through a bad time and this is what's happening. I really appreciate your prayers. Could you give me some meals? Could you, you know, um, I can't drive. Can you get me to doctor's appointments or physical therapy appointments? I can do all that. How, I guess everything went through the oral tradition. Talked to each other, stood far apart, talked to each other. It just made me wonder what their thoughts were doing this. Um, Through stories of God's providence and visions of future salvation, Daniel wrote to inspire hope among his people and stir up faithfulness to God. Likewise, written in a different time and context, God's people today can be strengthened, knowing that God has made himself known and has provided salvation for his people through the person and work of Jesus Christ. Okay. The person of Christ. Okay. Jesus doesn't leave any room for us to speculate about the interpretation of who Daniel talks about when he talks about the Son of Man. Daniel, could you also do Daniel 7:13?
Luckily, I did not close my Bible.
That's right.
I watched in the night visions. I saw one like a human being coming with the clouds of heaven, and he came to the anointed one and was presented before him.
Okay. So Daniel was saying this, he's going to come. This on the clouds of glory, he's coming. Okay. Could you read Matthew 24:15, Cassie?
It's kind of crazy that Nebuchadnezzar is training these young men to be advisors. I mean, they were taken as captives, and no, that's
I
interesting.
read a whole lot about appearances of Jesus.
Yeah.
No. And some scholars say that the fourth man in the fire with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego might have been Jesus. That's totally speculation, but
There's no way to prove it yet.
yeah,
Yeah.
But you know, you're talking about, think about Joseph's story.
Joseph, same
Yeah.
thing, very similar. So I'm sorry, what chapter do you want me to read, Matthew?
24 verse 15, and then Matthew 24:30.
24:15, okay. So when you see the horrible thing told about by Daniel the prophet standing in a holy place, note to reader, you know what is meant. Then those in Judea must flee into the Judean hills. Those on their porches, do you want me to stop there? Those on their porches must not even go out.
Okay, now do Matthew 24:30.
24:30. For false Christ shall arise and false prophets, and will do wonderful miracles, so that if it were possible, even God's chosen ones would be deceived.
Okay. Okay. So we see that even Jesus or the apostles say that Jesus quoted from Daniel, like I have come to fulfill the prophecy of Daniel. Okay, so after the death of Jesus, his followers established Christian groups in cities such as Jerusalem, and then it quickly spread to Damascus, Antioch, the capital city, Roman Syria, and which was one of the most important cities in the empire. And early Christians referred to themselves as brethren, which can also be translated as disciples, also translated as saints, depending on how you. But it was in Antioch, according to Acts 11:26, that they were first called Christians. So they were known as the brethren, the disciples, the saints, and they followed the way, was what it was called when it was still part of the Jewish sect.
Mhm.
Because when they first were established, they didn't divorce themselves from Judaism. They were still a sect of Judaism. Okay.
And
So,
Antioch is where on that map behind Sarah? Oh, okay.
Oh.
Oh, so it's in Syria.
So it's in Syria.
Okay. Huh. Thank you.
okay, they talked again about ecclesia being the word for church. It's now been translated into church, but it also can mean community. But ecclesia is actually a compound word. EKK actually means out. And ecclesia means to summon. So ecclesia is to summon out, to pull out, to separate yourselves. So it kind of goes along, that made me start thinking about being in the world but not of the world, like we separate ourselves from this. Um, so the Greek word ecclesia connects with the Hebrew word, and I don't even know how to pronounce it, Qahal. Kahal is how
Your guess is as good
yeah,
as mine.
Kahal, which means congregation, assembly, or company. Kahal, though, is congregations, assemblies, or companies gathered together for a purpose. Like if we were just all standing together chatting in the mall, we wouldn't be a Kahal.
And sitting in this room we are.
But here we are a Kahal. Then it's a designation for the people of God that as an assembly of people are called by God. Let's see. The universal church, I'll talk about, I'm good at the time. Okay. What are some of the contributions that Judaism has given to Christianity? All right, we begin with monotheism. You know, we are a monotheistic God. We don't believe in many, many gods. We believe in one God that's triune, has three parts to it. A messianic hope. They are still waiting for the first arrival of the Messiah. We're waiting for the return of the Messiah. Ethical values. We have very many of the same ethical values: hospitality, kindness, take care of the widows and orphans. You know, all of these. Love your neighbor. We also use parts of the Jewish Bible, the Old Testament, as we call it. They call it other things, but yes. The belief in coming together to worship in a particular place. Theirs was the temple early on, then the synagogue, ours is the church. Or in Jeff's parents' case, when they first started the Branderville Church, they met at a bar. And the minister stood behind the bar and preached.
I know at least two different people that go to bars to go to church.
The wine is readily available. Yeah.
As a teenager, it was fun to sit there and watch the minister alcohol in the background. Wine glasses and drink glasses.
Well, at one point, we tried to start a new church out in the southern part of the county. And Diane and Frank Clark opened their home, and the church met in their home for what, better part of a year, I think. And then it finally fizzled, and they came back here.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that they picked to be minister didn't exactly work out.
Okay.
And that was very similar to the origin of Branderville Church. It started sort of meeting in homes, figuring out what to do, and then it actually went to like the sales office.
Yeah.
Somewhere, and then they outgrew that, and then went to the restaurant, and
Okay,
then kind of outgrew part of that, so then we expanded to the upstairs, and then we ended up at the high school.
okay.
Yeah, and,
Wow.
so, you know, it just,
And eventually they built a building.
yeah,
And that's the church that's right on the lake?
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
There's two new disciple churches starting within the region of Virginia, one up in Harrisonburg, and they're meeting in all different kinds of places. And I'm not sure where the other one is. I just learned about that one. So new churches starting all over the place.
And I think
Yeah.
it's important for us to remember that we are called to be an assembly, a community. I hear from a lot of people when they talk about me going to church and I invite them to come to church. I don't like organized religion, but I'm spiritual. You know, yeah, you know, I'm spiritual. Okay, well, let me tell you some of the things you miss from being part of an organized church. You miss the fellowship of like-minded people. You miss the benefits of their wisdom because everybody knows something different from their walk, their faith journey. I might not be at that place on my walk yet, or as they discover it, the joy of their discovery reminds me of the joy of my salvation and my discovery. You know, all of those things. What are some other things that are benefits of belonging to an assembly, a congregation, a group of people? Support, emotional, sometimes physical, food, taking you in cars.
Just what I like. See if I can not stick with it. What I missed from Cindy's sermons, and I was reminded of it last Sunday, and David does it sometimes. The encouragement to be a better person. I need that encouragement to be better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can be spiritual, but I need somebody saying, you can do better. You know, cool. You can be better.
Because you leave after Sunday and go back to your routine, and then, you know, are you a better person because you came to church? You know, you have to live it.
But you gotta hear it before
Before
you
you
live
live
it.
it, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Tom and I went to the symphony last night, and I said to him at the end of it, I said, you know, it must be so exciting to be a musician in a symphony where, you know, you're all playing together and you're creating this beautiful sound and experience. But it's like that in church too. I mean, especially on high holidays like Easter, where everybody's singing, and a lot of times I'll just tear up because it's just so beautiful. It's so, I don't know, it just gets you right here that everybody's singing, everybody's praising God, and it's done as a community, and you just feel like all those voices going up to God is pretty powerful.
Yeah, Christmas Eve when we do silent night.
Yes,
that's it for
yeah,
me.
yes,
That's fun,
yes.
yeah.
And Easter morning when, you know, Jesus Christ is risen today. I mean, I can never get through that one without.
Yeah.
it.
Often Jeff and I will talk on the way home or during the week, and we'll reflect on what we heard Sunday. And Jeff knows I'm always telling him.
Sure, that's me.
I think it was.
Okay.
I do not sleep a whole night. I usually have an hour or two in the middle of the night that I'm awake, and then I can go back to sleep. But in that hour or two, I used to toss and turn on it. Now I realize that that's God's in my time, all alone, our time. In the dark of the night, I'm tired, so I don't feel the need to talk so much. And so I can listen. And I sometimes, what was I telling you the other day? Oh, I was going over a list of everything in my life I consider a faith. And I just was so, and all of a sudden, I realized, "Well, why don't you think about the things that have been incredible blessings?"
Mhm.
And as I began to recount, you know, Chrissy, meeting Jeff, Harvard, being able to have a career that I have loved my entire life. And in retirement, I still get to spend time with the children that I loved spending time with for my whole career. That I am truly blessed. And I really believe that sometimes God redirects, my thinking into a more positive look at things. And sometimes it's my time to pray for people. Like I'll wake up with people on my mind. The morning I was talking about my friend Terry at I often wake up with her on my mind and I'll pray for Chandler and things. And, just God will lay people on my heart and it gives me dedicated time to talk with him and then listen. Where do you want me today, God? Where can I be most useful today? This is what I have. And then sometimes he will tell me that he has other plans. And then we have a discussion about how there are things I need to get done. And I'm not sure that his agenda works well with my agenda. And then he always wins. I don't understand. But I tell Jeff, I go, somehow he always wins the argument.
How you keep arguing.
I said, Jeff goes, why do you keep arguing? And I go, no.
But I mean, a parent, right? A parent, he always wins.
That's right. That's right. And then,
I just sleep.
that's right. So if we, we were a part of Judaism, and there were sects, SECTS, within Judaism, and it was interesting the names they gave to some of them. This Matthew 6:10 called them, they used that verse to talk about shoulder Pharisees, shoulder Pharisees. Those were the ones that stood up and recited their good deeds. Lord, you know all the good things I've done. See this guy over here, I don't think he's done anything good. But you're looking at me and you know I've done good things. While the publican is crying out, oh Lord, forgive me because I'm a sinner. And the Pharisees going, hey, let's look at all the good things I've done. Then there's the wait a little Pharisee, which is let me gather people around so they can watch me do my good deeds. And there are people that like to broadcast all the things they're doing that are good. They want to tell you, well, I've been doing this and I've been doing that, just the litany of. Then they have the what?
Narcissist.
Yeah, the blind and bruised Pharisee. You close your eyes to temptation or sin, even to the point of where you get hurt running away from it. Like, oh my God, something bad is happening. Let me get out of here.
I read something about those, and to maintain their sexually pure thoughts, if they saw a woman, they closed their eyes and then walked into a building.
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
Yes, because they didn't want to leave their minds open to lust or temptation or.
So they wouldn't look at another one, and if a woman's walking down the street, they closed their eyes and kept on walking.
And just fell down or ran.
And
Yeah,
that's why
ran
they-
into
that's they
holes
were-
and
They were called the
blind and
blind and
bruised.
bruised. That's why.
Pharisees. What if every time we saw something sinful, we just, I have to walk around with my eyes closed all the time. Because you think about what's on TV.
Yeah.
Wow.
So then,
It is strange.
the painted Pharisee. And these were people that literally put a mark on themselves to separate themselves. Like you see, I'm a Pharisee. And I'm separating myself from everybody else.
But what kind of mark?
It was like a star, like the Jewish star, or a cross, not a cross,
Ashwin.
a sign up there, you know, like maybe they had a, what's the word I'm looking for? You know how we have when you have your ancestors and you've got like the little,
Like a
Oh,
shield.
crest.
Oh, the crest.
the crest of their
Their
church, or,
family.
yeah, they put those on.
And would this be something done permanently or something that they had to apply periodically?
They would do
come
it with
off.
henna,
Okay,
and then when
Got
it
it.
wore off,
Comes
they
off.
put it on again,
Got it.
yeah.
Well, if they didn't bathe that much, it probably.
They've gone a long
Yeah,
time.
Yeah.
The ever reckoning Pharisee, which is legalistic, work oriented, that the way you get favor in God's eyes is you follow every law, every jot and tittle of it, you know, and you take it a step further. So if you're not supposed to eat this part of a beast, well, I don't eat any part of it. You know, if you're not supposed to, if you're supposed to separate milk and dairy and meat products, they would separate everything. There was a cabinet for everything. So there was a cabinet for dry, a cabinet for, you know, it's like, let me take it a little bit further than the law says, and then I'll be justified. Let me do it a little
Well,
bit
now, I
better.
did read, those folks I have a little bit of sympathy for, that when they believed the reason they were exiled to Babylon was because they didn't keep the law.
Mhm.
So when they were allowed to come back out of Babylon, they said, we don't ever want to go through that again. What did we do wrong? We didn't follow the law. We want to not do that. If we follow the law, we will not be overrun
Exiled
again.
again.
So, you know,
Yeah,
those folks I kind of have a little bit of sympathy for. I understand where they're coming from. Some of the rest of them, they're just nuts.
Yeah,
and
true.
then there's the God-fearing Pharisees, which were the ones that were paralyzed for fear of doing something. They were like ineffectual because they were so afraid that any decision they made, any choice they made was going to be the wrong one.
Anxiety. too.
And then, yeah,
Yeah.
like super anxiety. And then there were truly the good Pharisees, and the ones they named Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea were both good Pharisees.
Like martyr.
They understood, or they believed that God loved them and they loved God back, and they wanted to do things in the service of the kingdom. Like Nicodemus was the one in the chosen anyway, that kept going to talk to Jesus, and Jesus kept telling him, this is what you've got to do. And he goes, I just can't quite do that. And Joseph of Arimathea was the one who actually gave the grave and the stuff to bury Jesus. Okay, so let's look at the timeline. Between 4 and 6 BC, which seems strange, so between 4 to 6 years before Christ appeared on the scene, he was born. So, according to the timeline of history, we first have the birth of Christ. Then 27 to 30 AD, we've got Jesus doing his public ministry, teaching and performing miracles. 30 to 33 AD, somewhere in there, if he started his ministry in 30, then he was crucified in 33. If he started his ministry in 27, then he was crucified in 30. Jesus was crucified in Jerusalem and is believed by Christians to have risen from the dead. 30 to 40 AD, we've got the early Christian community. And this is when the followers of Jesus formed the early Christian community in Jerusalem and other regions. But again, it was still moving towards the reaching out to the Jewish people to tell them that the Messiah has come. And they were still part of the Jewish church or the Jewish synagogue. Then 33 to 36 AD, somewhere in there, Paul was converted. And Saul of Tarsus was his Jewish name. Later known as the Apostle Paul, had a conversion experience on the road to Damascus. And he then goes out to the non-Jews.
But actually, I think Edgar Evans points out, every city that Paul went into, he first went to
To
the
the
synagogue.
synagogue.
And as long as he was received warmly, he stayed in the synagogue.
Right.
If they didn't receive him, then he went
Went
out
out
to
to
the
the- yeah.
Gentiles.
So the fact that he's well known for converting the Gentiles. I have to believe he didn't get received very warmly
In a lot of the.
in a lot of the
Yeah.
Jewish synagogues.
Yeah.
Okay, then 44 to 49, somewhere in there, the Council of Jerusalem took place. And this is where the council addresses issues of Jewish law and Gentile inclusion in the Christian community. This is where we begin to talk about, if you become a Christian, do you have to get circumcised? Because
Right, and do you have to follow the dietary
the
laws?
dietary laws and stuff. And you've got some people saying yes, you've got Paul saying no, and so the Council of Jerusalem met to make a decision about that. And their decision was, no, you don't have to be circumcised.
Was that when Peter had his dream? about
Yes.
the- Okay.
And so is that when the Christian church really stops being associated with
No.
Judaism?
No. No, it was just, you know, James was the head of the Christian church in Jerusalem. And James, the brother of Jesus. And he worked very hard to have the Christian church and Judaism remain connected. Being a part of Judaism, but believing that, and that's where the term completed Jew first came from. Like, you were Jewish and you believed in the Messiah, so the prophecy had been completed in you. Okay, so then in 50 to 60, Paul begins writing his epistles to various Christian communities. And then 50 to 70, we get beginning of the Synoptic Gospels. They're written sometime in that time. So then 64 to 68, you've got the persecution under Nero. Christians were persecuted in Rome, and Peter and Paul were believed to have been martyred during this time period. Paul was beheaded, and Peter was crucified upside down. He was given the opportunity to be crucified right side up, but he said he couldn't die the same way his Lord died. So he chose to be crucified. Which to me, and this is me, my own personal, when people talk about there isn't proof that Jesus rose from the dead, so forth, empty tomb. But the fact that people died, like, I'm not sure if I was telling a lie, I'd be willing to die. Upside down on a cross, have nobody find out about that lie. I think I'd say, okay, I lied.
Yeah.
But they willingly went to their death, knowing their salvation. I'm going to see my Lord again.
Hey, I have a medical question. It's my understanding that being crucified right side up, you basically suffocate.
You suffocate.
How do you die when it's upside down?
Well,
Not suffocate.
All the blood goes to your head, plus it's just from trauma and organ failure, death.
Okay.
But, with their head laying down, you include your trachea, if you're upright, right, and you're just so exhausted, you're doing this.
That's when you suck.
Yeah. And then just the sheer force of being, like out here, completely stretched out and nailed. You got all that shear and force too on your limbs.
Well, not all of them were nailed.
Oh.
A lot of times they were just tied to the cross, which is
Oh.
worse.
Well,
Um,
still,
but
it's
and
the
some of the
force.
crosses were
You said
X's.
it's a
Yeah, and
force,
some of them
you know.
had a place for your feet to rest.
Right, well, those are the right side up ones.
Right,
And
but
that
not
made it
all
worse.
of them did.
But that
Made
made
it
that
worse.
just, it dragged it out
Prolonged it.
because you'd prop yourself up so you could breathe. And then you'd catch some breath and then, so you
Slump again.
prolonged
Prolonged
it
it.
at that point. But yeah, and some of the crosses were not T's, they were X's.
Yeah,
So I don't know if Peter was on a T cross or an X
Like
cross
this
upside
way,
down.
like
Yeah.
that.
yeah, your hands
Worse.
up on
And you
the-
see, so you, if you're going up like this, it's still that force of shearing and pulling on your
Right, but
your
my
limbs and your
question,
muscles.
I get it when you're right side up.
Yeah,
It's the upside down. I
it's
was
just the
curious
blood
about. Okay.
Going to your head.
and you're just gonna,
I would
Probably
almost think you
quicker.
drive faster if you're.
it's
upside
probably
down.
quicker.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
probably quicker.
we can probably,
Let's Google it.
yeah. In 70, the second temple was destroyed. And this was a significant event in Jewish and Christian history. In 80 to 90, sometime in there, the Gospel of John is written. And 85 to 90, you've got the, and they call it the Johannine epistles. Johannine epistles. And then in 90 to 100, we have the writing of the book of Revelation. And it's composed containing apocalyptic visions. And the last original apostle to die was John. And John lived much of his life in the end on the island of Patmos. It's where he had his visions and where he wrote Revelation.
I'm
He lived in
not
a cave.
sure they're the same John.
John wrote on Patmos.
Right, a John.
Different John, not same John.
Not the same
Oh.
John. The one that wrote Revelation was not the apostle.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see. The first century Christian significance, the words of Jesus and sayings are collected and preserved, and the New Testament writings are written. A new generation of leaders succeeds the apostles, but still, everyone thinks the Lord's going to return at any time. There's still that belief that it's going to happen soon. Maranatha, come soon, Lord Jesus.
Yeah, you see that a lot in Paul's writings. He thinks it's happening tomorrow or next week.
Right, that's why you're not supposed to get married.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, the gospel is taken through a great portion of the known world of the Roman Empire. New churches at first usually begun in Jewish synagogues around the empire, and Christianity was first seen as part of Judaism. Okay,
And this is all around 100.
a key transition of Christianity beginning to emerge from the Jewish womb was the Christians did not take part in the revolt in 70 AD when the temple was destroyed. They relocated to Pella in Jordan.
Jordan, did you say?
In Jordan.
Oh, Jordan.
Jordan. The Jews at Jamnia in 90 AD confirmed the canon of the Hebrew scriptures, and these books are also recognized by Christians as authoritative.
I always thought that was interesting because, you know, before I started doing all this study and stuff, I assumed their scriptures had been made part of the canon long before Jesus was born, and that's not the case.
No.
I was very surprised when I learned what you just said.
And during all this, there are persecutions. In fact, Josephus seemed surprised that in his book, The Antiquities, that they still existed,
Do the Christians still exist?
that the persecutions were still existing into the first century. And Nero blamed the Christians in 64 AD for a fire that ravaged part of Rome, and to punish them, he poured pitch, which is like a tar thing, on Christians and used them as torches around his body.
That's just, you know, I just started reading this book. I think it's called Paul, and it's about this period in history, and it's a fictionalized version, but they talk about that, and I was like, I wasn't sure if that was a real thing. I was like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, I often think about, the persecution that some Christians have endured worldwide, even
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
And how easy it has been for me to be a Christian.
Yeah.
In the sense of, people aren't out to kill me. I don't have to worry that someone's gonna knock on my door and send me to Siberia or something.
Yeah.
That I am allowed to believe as I choose to believe.
Yeah, I often wonder about myself, if I had the option of being turned into a human torch or renouncing my faith. I hate to think of what I would do.
Yeah. There's a wonderful book right after Columbine came out. And it was called She Said Yes. Have any of you read that? Before the two Columbine shooters were going around, they walked up to a girl at the mall. Several people saw it and contributed to the book and asked her, "Do you believe in Jesus?" And she said yes. And they wrote about, and they called it She Said Yes.
Wow. Good.
It's a very interesting, the three students that ended up writing the book and talking about it, talked about what a profound influence that faith. It changed them. Not just the shooting, but it changed their beliefs and who they were. And, her death was a testament. So, and I think about that, about people that, the martyrs, Stephen
Yeah.
and other people that suffer because they choose to believe in Jesus.
I have a book at home that's bigger than this, about all the martyrs, Christian martyrs.
Wow.
Yeah. Throughout history, but I mean, it comes into almost modern times.
And the people that risk their lives to spread the word. I mean, Father Damien lived on Molokai his whole life and eventually got Hansen's disease. But he felt called there to that colony to do the people that live there. I don't know. Have you ever been put in a position where you had to defend that?
Not like that. Not with my life or.
No.
I mean,
Yeah.
people always ask you on debate things, ask you questions and why you believe and all that, but, like if they're atheists, I'm there's plenty of atheists or agnostics, and they're very vocal, what they believe. And they just try to justify why. I mean, not to the point where they're gonna say, I don't wanna be befriended,
Yeah.
something like that, or, but it's hard to like date somebody for me, I couldn't do that. You're always gonna be in conflict.
Oh, yeah.
And the persecutions go on at Columbia University today.
The persecution.
Persecutions at Columbia.
Well, the persecutions against the Jewish students at Columbia today, I mean, this stuff's still going on.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's Christianity's not the only one that believers are persecuted. I mean,
Right.
Harold brought up Jews. I mean, there's, I think, just about every religious faith in the world can cite instances through the course of history where their members of their faith community or faithful tradition have been persecuted in some form or another.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I finished chapter 2. So
Okay.
whoever's next starts chapter 3.